So next player in the queue is Jesse, also a strong player here, 2200. So let's see what happens. So d4. Here we're gonna go for, maybe we'll just go knight f6 here, see what he's got. And against knight f3, we'll go e6. And once again, see what he's got. g3. Let's go b5 here. In these positions, I think when white avoids going c4, I like these b5 systems, just taking this square. The first time that these kind of setups were played against me was by none other than Peter Svidler. And yeah, he won a game that, you know, he made it look quite easy against me. But in general, I haven't found something too great in these setups for white. This approach is interesting though. Let's go ahead and take. And he goes knight takes. And for now, I think we can just castle. And we'll see what happens. Probably I want to play some d5, c5 stuff and challenge the center. At the moment, white's claim to fame is that he has a little bit of a better center here. Another approach I could take is d6. But I'm somehow not such a fan of that. d5, somehow I like what my opponent has done here. I feel like he's a little bit better here, actually. And I'm not quite sure where I went wrong. c5 I could do, but after pawn takes, bishop takes, feels like my pieces are just a little bit on the shaky side. I prefer to play d5 and then go c5. So I'm going to try for that. For now, I'm not too worried about queen b3 ideas. I'll have bishop a6. Onto a good diagonal. If c5, pawn takes, bishop takes, knight takes d5. The problem is my bishop is hanging. I could go bishop takes f2 there, rook takes f2, knight takes d5. You know, position is, I think, okay for me there. So yeah, I'll go ahead and do that, because if I can get away with c5, I guess I want to play that move. I just realized now after d takes c5, I could also consider the move knight a6. Trying to recover the pawn with my knight instead. Then if b4, knight takes b4, queen b3, a5, should be okay for me there. Question is if d takes c5, d takes c5. Yeah, I think like, okay, d takes c5, bishop takes c5, knight takes d5, bishop takes f2 in order to not be down a pawn, rook takes f2, knight takes d5. I have a better structure. He has the bishop pair. His dark squared bishop is a pretty decent piece. But on the other hand, my structure is very solid. So yeah, I think that's quite interesting for me. The question though is after knight a6, maybe it's even better, potentially. He has c6, but after bishop takes c6, I don't see any discovered moves with the discovered knight moves that he can do to really give me any problems. So I'm going to go knight a6. So intention is to take on c5, probably with the knight, but I could also take with the bishop if I change my mind. Clever move, I think, because now if I go bishop takes c5, he might even have some rook takes, knight takes, bishop d6 ideas. Not sure that that's too scary though. But he also might have some knight c7 ideas. Again, not sure that that's so scary. If I play knight takes and rook takes, then that's good for him because he has the bishop pair. But after here, I could go rook c8. And then I don't really see anything for him. So I think the question is, which way do I want to capture? Knight takes obviously makes a lot of sense. My knight here is on the rim. But I have to also be a little bit careful, for example, of b4 ideas. Knight here and then some knight here. So just because I want to keep control over the b4 square, I'm going to play bishop takes c5. Again, he can go rook takes, knight takes, bishop d6. He'll get back his exchange because I cannot hang on to the material. But after a move like, say, knight e4, something like that, bishop takes f8, queen takes f8, the position seems equalish. I do have 2 pawns against 1 in the center, which is a slight edge for me, I think, strategically, but it's very minor. I would say it's just equal position because in some respects my bishop is worse than his bishop because my own bishop is locked in by this pawn, so it's hard to say. So far my opponent, I think, is playing, a very good game. Very interesting principled chess so far from him. And yeah, at the moment, I think in this game, the battle is for the center, really. I think a lot of these central and queenside squares is what's going on. There isn't much action going on here on the king side. Both kings are relatively safe. And so, yeah, my opponent plays a very natural move. He puts the knight on e5, just centralizing one of his pieces and activating his bishop a little bit. And his pieces have invaded my half of the board, whereas mine haven't been as rude to him. So I think it's important here in this position for me to try to maybe exchange some pieces because he has a slight initiative. I would say that's where his edge lies, and I have to diffuse that initiative without dropping into some tactical problems. For example, say I go knight e4, he takes, and knight d7 would be a very annoying move. So, there's little ideas like that. For example, if bishop b6, he might go knight d6, queen takes d6, and some kind of discovered attack. I don't think those work, but it's definitely things to watch out for. No, I don't see that as working. So bishop b6 would make a lot of sense because it would cover this square. Admittedly, this square would be a little bit weaker. It would also anticipate some knight d3 ideas. Rook c8 is also an option, but after knight d3, I don't want to drop back here because the pawn on a7 is falling, and if I go bishop b6, then knight d6 invasions might be a little bit annoying. So the move bishop b6 makes sense because after knight d3, if he does do that, then I have a tempo to potentially guard against this bishop d6 or knight d6 ideas. But do I want to, let's say, drop the knight back to e8 in order to cover these squares? It feels a little bit passive. So ideally I would want something here, something nicer than that line. Okay, so I have one idea, which is I'm going to put the bishop on b6 after all. And if he goes knight d3, rather than knight e8 to cover this square, I might go knight e4 and move forward instead of backwards, which in chess, much like in life, is usually a good thing. But in chess, sometimes you got to move backwards. Yeah, so he does go knight d3. It's a very good move, I think. It's very logical, trying to create some positional threats of knight d6. One option, of course, is to just go rook c8 and ignore the threats. If he goes knight d6, I'll go rook takes, queen takes, and then maybe even just bishop back to a8. And I'll say to him, well, your knight on d6 is a nice piece, but I have everything more or less under control, and I'll challenge it with knight e8 down the line. Yeah, I think that's very interesting to me. Knight e4, on the other hand, also very interesting. If he takes, I don't know. It's hard to say. If he takes, then goes something like knight e5, I will have the d5 square. My pieces should be very good. But my concern is maybe he goes king here. And then I'm not sure exactly how I'm progressing, how I'm dealing with the threat of f3. I could go something like g5 there, but it seems a little bit dramatic. Could also go rook c8, f3, knight c5, bishop d6. Okay, seems okay to me. I'm not so worried about bishop takes e4, d takes e4. My pawns will be doubled, but on the other hand, when you have all your pawns set up on dark squares here, you have to be very careful when you part ways with your light squared bishop, because you're going to be left with a lot of weaknesses on the light squares down the line. So that's not going to be so much fun for him, potentially. But then again, the queens will probably come off the board, so he could absolutely take the knight on e4, I think would be reasonable. Okay, he goes b4. I guess his intention is the simple move a5. And actually, that's a move I hadn't stopped to consider. And it's a pretty annoying move, as far as I can tell. Because how exactly do I deal with the threat of a5? It's a simple move, but it's an annoying move. Yeah, and now I also don't have so much time on the clock. So I'm not very happy with my position, I have to admit. Okay, I could do some queen move, just to give myself the d8 square for the bishop. Queen d7 also, but then knight e5 ideas are a bit annoying. Queen e7, bishop takes, pawn takes, bishop d6, queen here, bishop takes, takes. Looks pretty good for him, maybe. Okay, I have to find a move here. Will I go queen f6? It's not ideal, but I simply have to play a move. My opponent's been playing extremely well so far. And yeah, I just need to make sure that I don't flag. But I really don't like what's going on here. I missed this a4 move. If I had seen a4, I would have played something else. I would have played rook c8 and seen, you know, maybe I had some bishop c6 stuff after this. Yeah. So this is very ugly position, I think. It's going there. Okay, let's go here, back. I should have gone somewhere else, like queen h6. What did I do here? This is a terrible square, I think. I don't know. It's complicated. f3, I'll go queen d7. And then it takes, I'll take this guy. The point is, after f3, I don't want to go knight f6 because bishop d6. And queen e7, of course, makes sense to try and control the squares. But as you can see, white has had an initiative from the beginning of the game. And you really feel like the onus is really on black to be very precise. And if black fails to be very precise, he's going to have some trouble. I think that's what we're seeing in this game. That I failed to be precise, and now I'm very scared, right? Because the white pieces are very aggressively posted. Even this bishop is potentially in the action, this knight, and mine are a bit less impressive in their post. This knight, you could say, is a beautiful piece because it's central, but it's subject to being attacked. And you know, so my pieces aren't terrible. I would say this is the biggest problem, this bishop here. Somehow, if my arrangement was, I don't know, my queen somewhere else and my bishop here, but I'm lacking a little bit of space because he has that queenside space. Whereas although it looks like I have like a more central space, and I thought that was a bit of a source of an edge, the reality is that in this position, all his pieces have found more or less good squares. So my extra control in the center isn't really restricting him. Whereas my pieces are absolutely being restricted. My bishop, because of this, has been restricted to a very passive square. Also because of this powerful control over c7, right? So it's a combination of his superior pieces and his queenside structural space advantage that is giving me some problems here. On the other hand, he has some problems to solve. Like I may grab this pawn if he lets me. It's not clear that that's a bad idea. Although now I see that it's actually not a threat, because after knight takes, you would have bishop takes e4, d takes e4, intermezzo, bishop d6. So he does go for this move, and my intention was queen d7 here, hitting the knight, and I don't really want to go to e8. Maybe it'll turn out queen on d7 is undefended and x-rayed. In some situations, that's going to be uncomfortable for me. It can also be hit if at some point the knight jumps to either of these squares. So e8 had some advantages, but on e8, I feel my pieces would be less coordinated. My rook would be stuck. Here I want to at some point put my bishop on e7, put my rook on c8. He went for a very long think. Maybe, I don't know what he was calculating. Maybe he was just calculating some knight f6, bishop d6 stuff and trying to understand those positions and whether somehow black had compensation for the exchange. I didn't feel like there was compensation. He may have missed this move because he isn't responding immediately. After a long think, if I then reply with the move that I felt was let's say most logical, and then there's no instant reply from him, that suggests to me that he may have just missed the intermezzo. Here I'm going knight to d6, and again, it's a bit scary. I am playing with some fire. Maybe I could have gone knight f6, but what I like about knight d6 is that it stops b5 ideas, and now he's giving up his bishop there, which I really don't like this plan for him at all. I think that once he gives up that bishop, I'm not sure why he felt the need to give that up. I think once he does that, my pieces are springing back into life. So I'm going bishop e7 here with some knight takes b4 ideas, and importantly controlling against b5 because the knight on a3 would be hanging. I'm going to go queen d7 here, hitting the knight on b5 and defending against the threat. He goes knight b4, and now some knight e5 ideas may arise at some point. But for example, rook here, knight here, queen here, knight here, bishop takes, knight takes. It's a little bit maybe something I want to avoid. So I'm going to go bishop f6, hitting the knight and controlling the e5 square. I guess e3 just to fortify the knight. I don't really want to take because that would fortify this c5 square and then the knight would come to c5. Instead, I'm going to go rook b8 here to put a little bit of pressure on this pawn. He pushes anyway, makes a lot of sense to me. And now the question is, do I go knight here, knight c5, queen somewhere like d6, for example, takes. He could go rook c6, I could just go back. I could also take, knight here, but that doesn't look so attractive, and I could move my bishop. Moving my bishop is actually very interesting because now my idea is that I want to take here on d5 and take this b5 pawn on the next move. Knight c6 would be a blunder, so I could take and then take twice, and then the queen would hang. Now I'm going to go maybe rook here, actually. Because for now he's still not threatening to take, so rather than go backwards, it's kind of the same point that I was making earlier. Try and go forwards when you can, right? Go try and centralize your pieces when you can. He's got 15 seconds on the clock, which is a big problem potentially for him. Rook takes, and the b5 pawn is probably going to fall. I think I can even take this guy here, and the point is the queen is hanging otherwise. But with 6 seconds on the clock, and I am absolutely not afraid to flag people, given half a chance. Takes, rook takes, bishop here. The problem is this guy falls, so this move I missed. It's a good move. I'll go rook a4. Takes. now short, however, of some kind of back rank mate, then the position is always going to be over. So very interesting game, very well played by Jesse. I felt throughout most of that he was in control. And where I really felt, it's interesting that there have been some games here in this position, even a David Navarra loss actually to a much lower rated player. And it's interesting that he reached this position and he was in trouble here after 95. You can see it's a +1 position, +1.1 or something like this. So definitely was in a bit of trouble here. And my opponent, yeah, I felt he just played very, very well in the opening here. Seems like this was the critical mistake for me. Seems like I needed to develop something like knight a6 to follow former FIDE champion, actually, Rustam Kazanjanov. And then my position is very straightforward here, because if, let's say, he goes rook c1 or something like this, well, straightforward is the wrong word, but maybe play some setup like this, and then I don't have such pressure here against you know, all his pieces sort of came crashing down on my queen side. So it was a big misjudgment by me in this position. Yeah, I wanted to avoid something like this, but in fact, even let's say if you play a5 or something, okay, white has more space in the center, but you have this beautiful knight well placed on b4. Black can probably place the bishop here, and he'll have reasonable squares for all of his pieces. So this was my mistake. I went d5, and after this, I compounded the error with c5. And of course, I wanted this to work, but I was too optimistic. And knight b5 was a smart move. And then knight e5, and all my pieces are sort of getting into good squares. It's interesting, all his pieces. It's interesting that Navarra's 2350 opponent actually went wrong with this move, which allowed rook c8. Then he went b4, and after bishop takes b4, I don't know why Navarra lost this, because it looks pretty damn all right for black. I guess he must have blundered later on, but my opponent actually played much better. He played knight e5. Then he played knight d3, so these were the top moves, and b4, right? So very, very nicely handled this complex middle game. And already I'm just lost. I went queen f6 because I felt, what can I do in this position? In fact, I think really it's very nice. Bishop b6, I think, was maybe the final mistake, but already this position, I think, is just really bad. Maybe bishop takes c5 was the final mistake. Maybe I need to go knight takes. But here, you know, as you can see, b4 ideas are very strong. Turns out that the initiative that white has in this position is just too much. And really this mistake of d5 is a bad plan. And then c5 is compounding the error. So lesson to be learned here, if you're handling this position in the future, something like knight to a6. And then profit from this square at some point. Maybe put your pawns here. And if your opponent, if this means that you don't have the e4 square, it's not a bad price to pay in exchange for, let's say, something like this. And then, let's say, in fact, this is a really nice plan, I think. You're going to try and break with c5, right? So if he plays some silly move or something like this, maybe you'll fortify here. And then at some point or another, you might break with this move c5. This would be okay. And the other approach, I guess, is just normal development and ask white the question of how exactly he wants to proceed. Something like knight e1 makes some sense, but again, c5 is in the air, or as the computer is pointing out, if I play d5 in these circumstances, it's different because my pieces are much better placed. This bishop is looking a little bit silly here. In my view, where I got here, I was completely busted, and f3 here was just crushing, actually. So I got very lucky not to lose this position, because the point is after knight g5 h4. It's a well-known point of the knight. So yeah, in fact here the point is he can't go f3 because of this, but after a5 he absolutely can go f3 here. So I got extremely lucky that he played bishop e5 here, because if he goes f3, I don't think, short of flagging him or attempting to, I don't think there's anything at all to be done. And here I thought my position was starting to get better, but it turns out that if he goes b5 here, knight takes b5 I thought was okay, but he has this beautiful point queen a4, which I guess we both missed, and my queen is undefended. And if I go bishop c6, he's going to go rook takes c6, and in the end scoop up 2 minor pieces for the rook and pawn, which in a middle game like this is a big advantage. Again, thankfully we both missed that, and he went bishop takes d6, which definitely feels like he's starting to lose a little bit the thread of the position. Probably with only 1 minute on the clock at this point, you're uncertain, and so of course mistakes creep in. And here already I felt a lot more comfortable that the position was turning in my direction, because now I have the bishop pair, I've consolidated everything, and these guys are potentially a bit weak. Play wasn't the most precise from either side here in this position. Looks like white could have gotten back to some kind of equality with knight c5. And even here, his position is quite good. And it seems like once again I go a bit wrong with this move knight c5, takes. Here he had this option of rook fc1. And the point is, as far as I can tell, is that if I now go for something like this, I cannot take the pawn, because if I go rook takes, you can actually just take, and it's checkmate. If my position was something like this, then I could play rook takes b5, and okay, even there it says white is a little bit better, but at least it's not checkmate. But he makes another mistake, and after rook takes, here his final mistake is to take here, and finally the dust has completely settled and I'm up a pawn. But as we can see, a game riddled with mistakes, especially towards the end. And well, the conclusion is chess is a damn hard game, right? So let's just catch up with the chat for 1 second, and then I will take the next challenge.